Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the 8th canto, which is titled Withdrawal of the Cosmic Creations. And this is chapter 5, the demigods appeal to the Lord for protection. So we're on text number 34, I believe. So mam mano yasya samanmananti daivokasham yo balam andha ayu isho naganam prajanam prasidatam na sa maha vibhuti somam manoyasya samamananti devokasham yo balamandarayo isho naganam prajanam prasidatam na samaha vibhuti somam manoyasya samamamanti daivokasham yo balamanda ayu isho naganam prajanam prasidatam na samaha vibhuti somam manoyasya samamananti devokasham yo balam anda ayu isho naganam prajanam prasidatam na samaha vibhuti Amanandasya samamamanti Masana Mataban Mamatim Manoyasya samamamanti Divoka samyo balamandayu Iso naganam prajana prajanam Prasidatam na samaha vibhuti. Vaishnavis. Somam manoyasya samamananti Devoka shamyo balamandayo Isho naganam prajana prajanam Prasidatam na samaha vibhuti Somam manoyasya samamananti Devoka samyo balamanda ayu Isho naganam prajana prajanam Asipatam na samaha vibhuti Samamano yasya samanananti Dogekso balamantamano Ishonaganam prajana prajanam Prasidatam na samaha vibhutihi Somam, the moon, Manaha, the mind, Yasya, of whom? Of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Samam mananti, they say, Devokasham, of the denizens of the upper planetary systems. Ya, who? Balam, the strength. Andha, the food grains. Ayu, the duration of life. Ishaha, the Supreme Lord. Naganam, of the trees. Prajanaha, the source of breeding. Prajanam, of all living entities. Prasidatam, may he be pleased. Na, upon us. Saha, that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mahavibhuti, the source of all opulences. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Soma, the moon, is the source of food grains, strength and longevity for all the demigods. He is also the master of all vegetation and the source of generation for all living entities. As stated by learned scholars, the moon is the mind of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. May that Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of all opulences, be pleased with us. Please repeat. Soma, the moon, is the source of food grains, strength and longevity for all the demigods. He is also the master of all vegetation and the source of generation for all living entities. As stated by learned scholars, the moon is the mind of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. May that Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of all opulences, be pleased with us. Purport. Soma, the predominating deity of the moon, is the source of food grains, and therefore the source of strength, even for the celestial beings, the demigods. He is the vital force for all vegetation. Unfortunately, modern so-called scientists who do not fully understand the moon describe the moon as being full of deserts. Since the moon is the source for our vegetation, how can the moon be a desert? The moonshine is the vital force for all vegetation, and therefore we cannot possibly accept that the moon is a desert. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshusун미tamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayamupakadamayam Dadanti Swapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakopa Tubhyascha Kripasindubhyavicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So the verse again. Soma, the moon, is the source of food grains, strength and longevity for all the demigods. He is also the master of all vegetation and the source of generation for all living entities. As stated by learned scholars, the moon is the mind of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. May that Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of all opulences, be pleased with us. So I'm hoping that you may all be pleased with me. I feel like maybe a dark moon or a star amongst many moons. And many, many more moons be coming as this festival approaches. So praying for your blessings. So there's a mystical saying that says, as above, so below, so below, so above. Like whatever is we see as macro, it's also in the micro. So this entire world is an intelligent design. In fact, there's scientists now, they're Christians, they're actually coming up with this theory that, because they're theists, they're not atheists. Atheists think that everything happened by chance. So there's this theist scientist, and they're saying that there is actually an intelligent design behind everything. And they use some interesting analogies, like they show that there's this, when you actually analyze the cell in the body, there's the DNA, there's the RNA, and there's this thing, it's called the flagella. And it's like a little motorized motor in there. And it's got 40 parts they analyzed. And it's perfectly, all these parts are just perfectly in sync. And this little motor runs around in the cells and helps move things around and does all kinds of things. So how can such a thing like that just happen by chance? This is what the nonsense scientists are saying. And this is the whole, we can see Srila Prabhupada in this particular purport and throughout his books, he's always smashing these material scientists and these impersonalists. So we have Srila Prabhupada's books to show the fallacy of these things. What they say, it's like as dumb as saying, you want to build a beautiful home? Then just get all the stuff. You know, your wallpaper, your chandeliers, the flooring, everything. Just put it out in the parking lot and let's get some dynamite and just blow it up. And then if it doesn't happen, then just try it again, blow it up again. And then if that doesn't work, just blow it up again. And then by chance, eventually, you're going to have a beautiful home. So just think how mundane and idiotic that is. So can you imagine the universe coming into existence like that? This is what the material scientists are actually trying to tell us. That there's no intelligent person behind this world. And we're seeing from this verse that there's actually a person behind the moon. Prabhupada mentions he in the verse and in the purport. So if you're a real scientist, you come up with a hypothesis then you do some research, and then you come up with a conclusion. And we learn from Druta Karma how they come up with a hypothesis that they think, okay, Darwin's theory is that, from the species they've come, right? They use that, the origin of species. And they use the birds, like the finches. The ones with the large beaks, they exist longer because they could break things more, and then they live more, so then it's like that. But he doesn't talk, he just sees the minute things, the micro. But he doesn't see the macro. He doesn't explain, what about the source of all these things? Where does that come from? So in their theories, they try to use the sifting, what is that technique used? They call the knowledge filter, where they anything that doesn't tie in with their theory, then they just filter it out. But there's so much evidence to prove otherwise. And Prabhupada wanted this to be defeated. I think there was a letter, there was a devotee giving a class, and he was saying how in 1977, Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter to Rameshwar, actually, saying that he wanted him to fund the Bhaktivedanta Institute to smash these material scientists and to give them, how much was it, $10,000 a month or something at that time, Srila Prabhupada was saying. So, this mind is actually the reservoir of all changes. And how these senses, they're all representations of the different demigods. Like we just found out that the mind is represented by the moon. And the eyes, they're represented by the sun. So if you analyze all your senses, you'll see there's a person behind them. So, as below, as above. So these things are there. So the mind, as we're going to find out here, just like the moon, it's very flickering. And the analogy that used is that the mind is being reflected on the water, like the moonshine being reflected on the water. And when you look at the reflection of the moon in the water, it appears to flicker. It changes different shapes. Sometimes it's round, sometimes it's long, sometimes it's broken apart. It's all different shapes like that. So this is the illusion of the material mind identifying with this matter. Actually, the moon doesn't break apart. It doesn't move. It's stationary in one place. But yet, due to material identification, it appears that the moon is moving or going up and down and flickering. So in the same way, the living entity comes in contact with material energy, and it appears to go up and down into the higher regions of the universe, up to the lower regions. It appears to take on different species, different forms, from the worms, the ants, the microbes, the animals, the birds, the beasts. So according to the mind, it can actually produce a particular type of body. And this is what we're doing in the material world. Prabhupada explains that we don't, the scientists are attempting to go to higher planetary systems and get better situations, get better, facilities like that. But Prabhupada says you can't do it that way. Actually, he says here that individually a person can go to any planet he desires. And he said it's only possible simply by the psychological changes in the mind. So because the mind is that nucleus of the material body, and the gradual evolutionary process of the material body depends on the psychological changes within the mind. So that's what we just simply have to change our mind. Just like the analogy is used as the construction of a worm, that it transforms itself into a butterfly. See? Or even in today, sometimes the mentality changes of a person. They're a man and then they want to change into a woman. So they do that. They change. So So this is the various phases of life that we go through, beginning from birth to death. So all these properties and these changes, like the flickering, they actually don't affect the soul. But it appears to be, just like the waxing and the waning of the moon. It doesn't affect the moon itself, but they're just, by our perception, it appears to be that way. So there's so many analogies that were used about how this reflection of the sun or the moon in water, and how it relates to our position in the material world, and how it relates to the agitated mind is compared to the agitated water, reflecting the light. So how similarly the minds were agitated, and then we wander into different material atmospheres. And then we receive different types of bodies. Just see how powerful the mind is. That's why it says Krishna, the moon represents Krishna. He's the source of all opulences. Krishna says, I am the moon. So there's so many nice topics. You could give a whole class just on comparing how we're like a reflection in this material world. So materialistic persons who are actually attracted to sense gratification, they become devoted to these different demigods, like the moon god, or different gods, and then they could be elevated to these particular planets where they can drink this soma juice, it's described. And they become like immortal, almost immortal. But Prabhupada says here that those who are materially passionate, or those who want to exhibit their intelligence for material advancement in life, are generally worshippers of Lord Brahma, and persons who are in the gross ignorance of identifying with the body worship Lord Shiva. So he used the analogy like Hiranyakashipu, different demons, they worship these different demigods. But it's described here that neither the demigods controlling fire, the sun, the moon, and the stars, nor those in charge of earth, water, air, ether, speech, and mind, actually can remove the sins of their worshippers, who continue to see in terms of dualities. But here's the most important part here. But wise sages destroy one's sins when respectfully served for even a few moments. So just see the power. So as long as we're under illusion, we accept the body or the mind, as the soul. And when we do that, we'll always be unhappy. It's described to be like a man, his burning in the autumn heat. But when the same living being, he becomes a devotee of Lord Krishna, then at once he lives a life of soothing life, like the cooling rays of the autumn moon. So this is Krishna. He descends like this, like the moon, to reclaim humanity. So he preaches this Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he says, give up all these other flickerings of the mind and just focus and fix it on me. And then you'll become you have a very soothing life, like in the moonshine. So this is how Lord Chaitanya appeared. It's described that he appeared like the sun and the moon. Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they appeared as the son of Mother Sachi to spread devotional love of himself. So he can drive away all this darkness and this ignorance of identification with this dark matter. There's a nice quote Lord Chaitanya gives. Even though he was here, such a great scholar, he did so many teachings, but he only left these Shikshastika verses. And the one that says, Lord Chaitanya says, Ananda Buddhi Vardhanam, the spiritual joy is just like an ocean. But here in the material world, we've got experience that the ocean does not increase. The ocean remains within its limit. So the analogy that's given is that this ocean of nectar increases just like the waxing of the moon. when the moon is rising and it becomes more and more waxing, it's like a sliver at first. Then it gradually, that small curved line, the second day it gradually increases, the third day it gradually increases, and then finally it's full. And then this is what it's like. We're learning from the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita. We're getting full knowledge. So that's where our life becomes eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. So for a pure devotee, he's very calm in mind, even amidst all kinds of anxieties in the material world. But when the new moon of Krishna rises, by chanting the holy names, no one can stop him from dancing and chanting and shedding tears in ecstasy. So this is Lord Chaitanya's prayer, and he's saying, "Oh my Lord, when shall my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly by chanting your holy name? And when will the hairs of my body have eruptions by the recitation of your name?" So this is what Prabhupada wanted. He wanted to make moons, not stars. He said, we want one moon, not millions of stars. What's the use of the stars, he said. And he said that if you just have one moon, then it'll light the whole sky. And he quotes his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, as saying that after propagating all my missionary activities, I will consider my mission a success if I just make one moon, one devotee that becomes a moon. And as Krishna says, among the stars, I am the moon. And we see, has anybody ever seen the moon shine over the ocean in the evening? It's so beautiful. And this represents Krishna's face. And I found some really beautiful quotes about Krishna and his face. This is from the Madhya Lila 21. The face of Krishna is the king of all moons, and the body of Krishna is the throne. Thus the king governs the society of moons. Krishna has two cheeks that shine like glowing gems, but are considered full moons. His forehead is considered a half moon, and the spot of sandalwood there is considered a full moon. His fingernails are many full moons, and they dance on the flute in his hands. Their song is the melody of that flute. His toenails are also many full moons, and they dance on the ground. Their song is jingling of his ankle bells. Krishna's face is the enjoyer king. That full moon face makes his shark-shaped earrings and lotus eyes dance. His eyebrows are like bows, and his eyes are like arrows. His ears are fixed on the string of that bow, and when his eyes spread to his ears, he pierces the hearts of the gopis. The dancing features of his face surpass all other full moons and expand the marketplace of full moons. Although priceless, the nectar of Krishna's face is distributed to everyone. Some purchase the moon rays of his sweet smiles, and others purchase the nectar of his lips. Thus he pleases everyone. Krishna has two reddish, widely spread eyes. These are ministers of the king, and they subdue the pride of Cupid, who also has beautiful eyes. The face of Govinda, which is full of happiness, is the home of the pastimes of beauty, and it is very pleasing to everyone's eyes. If by devotional service one gets a result of pious activities and sees Lord Krishna's face, what can he relish with only two eyes? His greed and thirst increase twofold by seeing the nectarian face of Krishna. Due to his inability to sufficiently drink that nectar, he becomes very unhappy and criticizes the Creator for not having given more than two eyes. So it goes on and on about Krishna comparing his beautiful features to the moon. And we can see the moon is so beautiful, isn't it? So how could the scientists say that on the moon it's just sand, it's just a desert? Because they have no knowledge. So what to speak of the nectar and the beauty of the spiritual world? And that's what Krishna comes to reveal. And we're so fortunate that we have the pure devotee who is one of the moons of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's a nice quote here, says, there is a Shastric statement that when the pure devotee appears in the world, he's not really seen by people. His appearance is compared to a cloud in relation to the moon. The moon is actually stationary in the sky, but it appears to be blowing across the sky with the clouds. It is an optical illusion. Similarly, a pure devotee often appears to be an ordinary person moving through the world, but actually his mind is only fixed on Krishna. So this is the example of a unflickering person, unflickering mind of the pure devotee. So, out of the causeless mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we've been able to get a glimpse of his divine character, and also the character of Krishna, Lord Chaitanya. And just like Lord Chaitanya appeared, also this Srila Prabhupada has appeared like the rising moon in the night of this inauspicious Kali Yuga, a dark age. And he's given us this cooling, soothing rays of this transcendental knowledge. So he's dissipated our ignorance of this mature world. So we should pray to Srila Prabhupada that may I become attracted to his moon-like personality, and just like a chakora bird, it just subsists on moon rays. And this is what we're all made of Srila Prabhupada's mercy like that. So I'd like to end there, and Jai, Brigupati has the question.
Thank you, Prabhu. Nice class.
Thank you, Brigupati.
So Prabhupada says here in the purport, unfortunately, modern so-called scientists who do not fully understand the moon describe the moon as being full of deserts. So, if I'm not mistaken, don't they claim they have all sorts of photos and, you know, sorry. You got it.
You know that argument.
Yeah, so what's our response? I mean, you know, because they would just say, whoa, what are you talking about? We've, you know, sent this vehicle there and that vehicle there, and we've had pictures, you know, they would think this as a ridiculous statement that, you know, because they have all sorts of...
Right.
So what's our response to that?
Archita was very eager to put his hand up. Let's see what Archita has to say when you said that.
They have photos of so many people, including us, and they think that we're just a bunch of chemicals. They don't know what they're looking at, in other words.
Yeah.
They think a person is just a bag of chemicals. And they can prove it photographically. Here's a picture of you. But they don't know what they're looking at. They can't see the life force, which is the real person. So they may flash so many photos of Moon and Mars and this and that, but they don't know what they're looking at. They interpret it in one way because that's what their limited material vision allows them to see. But one who can actually see sees the actual reality. Just like a transcendentally situated person sees the actual soul person inside this bag of chemicals. And therefore they're not disturbed or by the bag of chemicals. So many different bags looking different ways, but they're not disturbed by that. They see the actual spiritual reality. So similarly, a transcendentally situated person can see the actual reality of the moon and the Mars and everything else. They're not seeing just what the photo shows. The photo shows that you're a bag of chemicals, but that's not really you. So you can't, just to say that you have a photo doesn't prove anything.
Is that okay? Yes, Prabhu. Oh, Sarah has a comment.
Is that the pictures of the moon, somehow or other, if you drive about 5 hours east, look just like Arizona.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada made a statement about that it's not the moon. They haven't gone to the moon. They went to Arizona.
Yes. The hoax, the moon landing, a huge hoax. Yes, Prabhu, he's coming. Jai.
Thank you. My question is, can you give the comparison between a devotee who shines like a star and shines like a moon?
Okay. Prabhupada says that there's many stars may come, many devotees. They're like very charismatic, very, they do a lot of things. They're like stars. They become like a rock star or something. They're really good. But they just come and they go, they flicker out. But a moon, it doesn't. It stays, it shines, it's steady. So that's one example. And there's other examples that are used like that too. So Prabhupada says, what's the use of millions of stars? We just want one moon-like devotee who's very steady, who's bright, who is fixed. So, yes, any other comments or questions? Yes? Oh, you have the mic. Okay. All right, well, thank you for your kind attention. All glories to the Srimad Bhagavatam.